everyone. Happy Friday. Not sure how happy this is going to be today because we actually did kind of have a fun episode planned, I guess. But we found out some, I think, legitimate bombshell news yesterday. And it's just way too important for us not to talk about. So we've kind of changed direction on today's podcast. And I honestly cannot believe that nobody is talking about this because it has me really concerned. And for those of you who listen to the show regularly, you know I'm a huge fan of Andy Frisella and his podcast, Real AF. I've been listening to him for the last 4 or 5 years. And he was actually my inspiration for deciding to leave my law enforcement career and speak out publicly about my beliefs. And Stephanie and I were talking about this yesterday, that he's always so far ahead of the game when it comes to talking about what's happening in our country. And his episode yesterday, I think it gave both of us the chills, and not in a good way. So I want to set this up with a little bit of backstory. If you guys haven't been paying attention to the news, the left has been losing their fucking minds over a comment that Trump made last Sunday during an interview that he did on Fox News. So first, I want to play a clip of what he said.
What are you expecting? Joe Biden said he doesn't think it's going to be a peaceful election day.
Well, he doesn't have any idea what's happening in all fairness. He spends most of his day sleeping. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
How are you going to guard against the bureaucrats undermining you?
Well, they're going to undermine. Well, I always say, so we have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries, because if you have a smart president, he can handle them pretty easily. I got along great with all. I handled them.
Okay. So he's talking about the enemy from within.
Yeah. So Kamala went on Fox News and she lost her mind over that comment. And so Brett Baer played the clip for her where, to give some context. And then this is her responding to that.
That clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within, that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
He was asked.
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the president of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
Okay, my blood was boiling because I'm like, what have we heard from her and Biden for the past 3.5 years about the extreme right, whatever they call, the radical right, and painting everyone on the right, all Trump supporters, to be domestic terrorists. They literally use that word, domestic terrorists. They've gone after parents that just want the best for their kids in the school system. But then she has the nerve to call him out for saying that there's an enemy within. Unfucking believable.
Yeah, this is coming from the party that can't let go of the January 6th insurrection narrative. And so they've latched onto these comments from Trump. This is their way of proving see, he's a dictator. And if he wins the election, he's going to use the military to imprison the American people. And Kamala is using this to her advantage big time right now. I'm sorry, I think that interview with Brett Baer, she completely fucked that up.
Yep.
But she did a rally in Pennsylvania the day after Trump made these comments, where she said that he's becoming increasingly unstable and unhinged. And so now all we're seeing the MSM talk about when it comes to Trump is how he's going to use the military against US citizens.
And this is just crazy because, you mentioned January 6th, and it's like, okay, let's look at all 4 years that Trump was president. There were times during those protests where I was like, why the fuck doesn't he send the military in? But he didn't. And he left it up to the states. He didn't imprison anyone. He didn't put the military against anyone. Like, he didn't do any of this stuff. Who did? The Biden-Harris administration. January 6th, those people, they're still in jail. Like, they've been treated worse than animals, and they get away with it. And that's what pisses me off. It's like the right has let this narrative go along that these people, these January 6ers are so bad, and hasn't really, we've just like let it happen. And can you imagine if it were protesters at the Capitol on the left and Trump tried to imprison them the same way the January 6ers are? Like, he would be a dictator, But here
Well,
they're the dictators, but they just keep calling him the dictator, and it's maddening.
Well, all we have to do is look back at everything that happened during the Summer of Love with all the, quote, peaceful protests of looting and burning, and how there was no accountability for any of that. And it's like there is some shit going on here that people aren't paying attention to. And Stephanie, we've talked about this over and over and over on this podcast. We don't believe the left is going to let Trump win the election. Like, regardless of the outcome, it's not going to be pretty. Like, our country is so divided right now. Some shit is going to go down in this election. And it's now what, like 2 weeks away, 2.5 weeks away. And I would be shocked if there wasn't violence involved. And so, like, these comments from Trump are just fueling the fire for the left. But we need to take a look at what's been happening behind the scenes in the Biden-Harris admin, because this is some scary shit. And so I'm going to play this clip from yesterday's episode of Real AF. And this is a long clip. It's going to be like 12 minutes, but you guys need to hang in there and listen to this, because this is what's really going on. And this is the stuff we all need to know. And by the way, all the information that's mentioned in this clip, it's all there in black and white on the DOD website. So here we go.
Okay. I'd like you to introduce you guys to Mark Esper. Okay. He was he was the Pentagon chief under Trump. Okay. When Trump was in office. And he just went on a CNN interview. And he said, take Trump's words seriously. He will try to use military on citizens. Okay. And he went on CNN. Let's listen to this interview real quick.
Well, I just think about what you wrote in your book, and that during the George Floyd marches and protests in 2020, he asked about shooting protesters. And as you wrote, you quoted him saying, can't you just shoot them in the legs or something? And so when he's saying that the enemy from within should potentially be handled by the National Guard, and if necessary, the U.S. military, do you fear that he would try to utilize the National Guard, the military, against U.S. citizens?
Yes, I do, of course, because I lived through that. And I saw over the summer of 2020 where President Trump and those around him wanted to use the National Guard in various capacities in cities such as Chicago and Portland and Seattle. And of course, there was a moment in time, as you just described, where he, on that early date in June, where he wanted to bring an active duty military as well. So that's what equally concerns me about his comment would be the use of the military in these types of things. Now, the good news is I don't believe he has the authority under the law to use the military unless there was some type of civil disobedience or insurrection, in which case that would be use of the Insurrection Act. But otherwise, these other roles that he's described in the past are law enforcement, and that is prescribed under the Posse Comitatus Act, so he would not be able to use it. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but this would be a good discussion to have. But my sense is his inclination is to use the military in these situations, whereas my view is that that's a bad role for the military. It should only be law enforcement taking those actions.
But
that's very interesting.
Well, I'm going to say this. I want to, before you get in,
Mm-hmm.
She is sitting here trying to paint this picture that Trump wants to go handle the enemy from within, as if we're talking about the people that were protesting during George Floyd. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about you.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about her. He's talking about people who are willingly lying to the people and government officials who are subverting our entire country.
So, committing treason.
Yes. That's what he's talking about, the enemy within. He's not talking, they're trying to deflect it and scare the shit out of every single person that doesn't like Trump. Trump is not trying to shoot those people or prison those people. That's what they were trying to do during COVID. Okay? We had Tim Walz, Mr. Turdball, having his own police force shoot paintballs at their own citizens to keep them in the house. Okay, how long till paintballs turn into rubber bullets, and how long till rubber bullets turn into bullets? Trump didn't do that. Tim Walz did that. Okay, she, her, and everybody else that acts like her, who willingly goes on TV and pushes this crazy shit. Those people are guilty, dude. They're guilty of treason,
and they know it.
Yeah, and that's why they work so hard to do this.
Well, there's a very important thing, man. And this is a common thread that we see all the time, that this fucking deep state cabal, whatever you want to call them, that they do, right? It's like, I know you are, but what am I, right? And they try to guilt trip people into, oh, well, he's going to do this, and blaming the other side for doing all of the shit that they are actually doing.
That's a communist tactic,
right?
Yeah.
Well, let's expose some of that.
Okay.
This is very, very important. And all of you guys listening and watching, please pay very, very close attention to this next portion because it's extremely important. All right. Now, just a little side note on Mr. Esper here. Like I said, he was the former defense secretary. And he also is quoted saying that, Trump's a threat to democracy. That's a common occurrence, common, catchphrase that these people like to use. Let's go to the DOD. Okay. Department of Defense. Here's a screenshot of the website. I spent literally a couple of hours diving into this and making sure that we have all the facts right. And it's very, very important. This is the Department of Defense, okay? The Senior Intelligence Oversight Official. This is an official website of the United States government, okay? And we're going to pay very, very, very close attention to this DOD Directive. Okay, the DOD Directive is Directive 5240.01, okay, which is the DOD intelligence and intelligence-related activities and defense intelligence component assistance to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities. Now, this was updated September 27th of 2024. I have it right there. All right, and this was approved by Kathleen H. Hicks, who is the Deputy Secretary of Defense under Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, this lady right here, okay? And to no surprise, she was put in 2021 under the Biden administration. She's a registered Democrat, and she's been in office since 21. Now, I read through this DOD directive, okay? Again, it was amended. And they knew they call it a reissue. It was reissued on September 27th of this year. All right. And there's a very important piece in this new directive, which is that third bullet point there. Okay. Which reads, assigns responsibilities and provides guidelines for defense intelligence component intelligence assistance to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities. All right. Now it goes on. It's a pretty big document. We'll link it here for you guys, but we're going to pull the very, very important pieces here. Okay. In 3.3, it talks about levels of authority. Okay, and it says that the DIC may provide personnel to assist a federal department or agency, including a federal law enforcement agency or a state or local law enforcement agency, when lives are in danger, in response to a request for such assistance in accordance with the following approval authorities, saying that it must first go through the Secretary of Defense, for approval. All right. And I want you guys to pay very, very close attention to that subpoint C. Okay. Subpoint C reads, assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality or any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. Such use of force must be in accordance with DOD Directive 5210.56, potentially as further restricted based on the specifics of the requested support. What this just did was gave our military the complete authority under this defense secretary to use lethal force on American citizens.
While they're on TV saying Donald Trump's going to do it.
Now, it's very, very interesting, okay? Because, like I said, I spent hours literally just on this one subject here. And I found this other directive, okay? This other directive that came out. This is the same directive before it was amended, okay? Before the reissuance in September 27th, okay? And this had a very interesting update. The last update to this directive, the date you guys can see right here, was March 19th, 2018. Okay. Who was the president during that time? It's Trump, right? Now we talk about, Trump being this evil dictator, right? It's interesting because, in this directive, there was a change, and Trump is the one that put the change in through his defense secretary, where he clearly stated, and it was put in, that no lethal force was included. That yes, military can go assist law enforcement, local, state, and federal for these massive national events, but no. I mean, here's the direct policy there, and so we're looking at Section 4 there. It's pretty much the same thing, but it does not give the military the authorization to use force, especially deadly force. So point C is the same as point 4 here, and you can see the difference. So this is Trump's version. All right, point 4 there. And they added in the use of force. This administration added in the use of force. All right, now, and as you can see, that change was made, again, March 19th of 2018. Now, I've been looking all over and, seeing a bunch of things on this. And people say, oh, well, no president can use the military on its people. That's not true, right? And we're going to circle back to Mr. Mark Espers here because he plays a very, very key role in this piece that I found. Obviously, we got War Powers Resolution. There's a bunch of acts that were put in by Congress that limited the scope of what the president can do with the military, right? And there's this very important phrase called Posse Comitatus, okay, which was an act that was put in. And what Posse Comitatus basically does is that's the law that bars federal troops for participating in civilian law enforcement, okay, unless it's authorized by law, right? And it's a very old term. All right. It was actually passed back in 1878. It's been around for a long time. And guess who put it in? Democrats. Democrats put it in. And they put that in specifically to stop the president from keeping or using the military during the Jim Crow era, right? That's what it was put in for. Now, where it gets very, very interesting here, please stay with me, all right? The weak points of Posse Comitatus, and they note that it was events in 2020 and 2021 that highlighted two loopholes of the Posse Comitatus Act. The first involves the DC National Guard, where, it's not really considered a state, and it's typically always under presidential control. And they refer to 2021. What happened in 2021? The January 6th thing, right?
That was, yeah.
Right? And it's funny because Trump tried to get them to use the DC National Guard to assist in a civilian law enforcement situation, and it was denied.
Yep.
It was denied. The request was denied by the Department of Defense. Guess by who? The same fucking guy that is saying that Trump's going to use it on America.
Yeah, this guy's full of shit.
So they rechanged this directive, which just gave permission for our American military to be used on American citizens and use lethal force. And they're still trying to say that it's the other side. And
yeah, dude.
What do you got on this, man?
I got that. Believe that what I've been saying this entire time. They're not going to allow Trump, regardless of the election results, to peacefully assume power in the United States. And I believe that they're preparing to do whatever they have to do to make that a reality. Doesn't matter what. And I think there are no limits to what they are willing to do to make that happen. I just don't.
Civil unrest.
I think they're going.
Uprising.
Yeah. And I think look, if they steal it again and this many more people are voting for Trump, everybody's going to know that they stole it. And it's not this thing that they call an insurrection in 2021 is going to look like a fucking, Boy Scout troop meeting compared to what people are going to do if they just rip it off right in front of people. This worked in Brazil. This worked in Venezuela. This worked in other places. You know why? Because they don't have any guns.
Yep.
Okay, so they're setting up for violence between our government and our citizens. And then they're going on the news and saying that Trump's going to do this violence when they are clearly preparing to do it themselves. And there's going to be people that believe them, which is really screwed up. So, yeah, man, I sent that to some of my buddies who are senators, and they put an official DOD request for explanation. So maybe we'll have more information soon. But I think it's very clear why they would do that. There wouldn't be a reason they would do that if they weren't planning on some sort of something.
Yeah. Shit's wild, man.
Listen, dude, you know how many Democrats have come out and open and said, dude, don't vote for Trump. I voted for Biden last time, vote for Trump. A lot.
Shit ton.
A lot. And they're not going to be able to fudge it this time. Like the Vegas odds as of this morning were almost, it was 60-something% to 40% for Kamala. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge swing there that, people know. People they're not going to be able to fudge that. And if they can't, I think they're just going to say, well, fuck off. What are you going to do? And we're going to have decisions to make at the local police level, at the state level, at the National Guard level. And, there's going to be decisions made as soldiers of what side you're going to take and what orders you're going to follow. Because, these people took an oath to protect this country from enemies, both foreign and domestic. And I think it's very clear that we have a group of domestic enemies. And there's going to be some hard decisions that are going to have to be made, in my opinion.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
so
wild.
Much to unpack there.
I know. It's funny. You sent that to me yesterday. I was at Chick-fil-A with my husband and kids. My husband's like, do you have to be on your phone right now? I was like, yes, this is a national security issue. I have to be on my phone. But seriously, they mentioned the communist tactic of blaming the other side for what you're planning. And when they said that, I thought of Mao. And so I just did a quick search and I was like, history really does repeat itself. Because here, it's saying the Chinese Communist Party was formed by young urban intellectuals that were inspired by European socialist ideas, Does that not sound exactly like what we're dealing with now with the left? And then, just to remind everybody that Mao's like policies and everything he did was responsible for 40 to 80 million deaths due to starvation, persecution, prison labor, and mass executions. And that freaks me out because they say history repeats itself, and all that shit that happened there, it's like they're lining it up to happen here. And, listening to them talk about the military, it goes along with everything we've been saying. Like that episode where I was talking about Stephen Greer, and he was like, yeah, there is a black ops military that's running this government. And, we all know about the military industrial complex, but we don't even know about all the black ops military things going on. And this is like making sense now that they're not going to just let Trump come in. Like, and they have the power and the money and the resources to do whatever the fuck they want, and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah. And then what they were talking about towards the end there with people having to make hard decisions, people are going to choose. What are you going to choose? You're supporting your family or going against your government. Like, this is going to put a lot of people in a situation where they feel they have no answer. And I look at some of the stuff that I watched law enforcement do during COVID that I thought was completely unconstitutional. And I said, like, there's no fucking way I would ever do that. But again, at the time, I didn't have a family to support. I had only myself to think of. I didn't have kids to feed. Like, it was an easy decision for me to make, whereas a lot of people can't make those decisions. So if you have a bunch of law enforcement and military who are told by their government, you need to enforce this or else, what are people going to choose to do? And this is why I think we're legitimately being set up for a civil war. Like, we have not seen anything like the Civil War, right? But I think we're possibly coming to that because if it comes down to this, people are going to have to choose sides, and both sides have guns. So I don't foresee this being peaceful.
Well, here's the thing with that. And I am like definitely pro Second Amendment. And, Andy was like, they did this in Brazil. I mean, they've done it in a lot of places. And as soon as he said that, I was thinking, yeah, our government, our CIA was like part of that. Maybe that was a test run, but he said they got away with it because they don't have guns. Well, here's the thing though, like when they wrote that into the Constitution, that's when we were talking about like bayonets, look at now, we don't stand a chance. Even if you have like a AR-15 and like a whole stockpile, we're talking about the military that how many times have we talked about these things that we don't even know about that they have? Unlimited funds. I mean, are we really going to stand a chance? No, it'll be like China where there's, 40 to 80 million people that tried to fight that just don't stand a chance. Like you just don't. And what you're saying is totally correct. It's like, let's say that theory that COVID was just a test run. They were testing us to see like who's going to go along with it. Everyone went along with it. Everyone. Right. No one like actually fought. I mean, there were people that were like, I'm not going to get the vax, even if I lose my job. But the masses went along with the plan. Mm-hmm. And that's probably what would happen again, because a lot of people realize like you just don't stand a chance.
Yeah. What are most people going to do if the military or law enforcement shows up at your door?
Right.
Like, it's either going to be the diehard, patriots that are going to be like, you're not taking my guns and let's see who shoots first. And then we're just going to have a bunch of bloodshed, or you're going to have the people that are just going to comply because what else are they going to fucking do?
Okay. So this is going to sound like I'm going on like a weird tangent, but I have not been able to stop thinking about this since you were like showing me all this yesterday. Okay, so do you remember the whole Waco, Texas thing where like David Koresh and like he had this cult and they had like a commune or whatever? So I watched a documentary recently that completely changed everything I thought that event was, because it was told from the point of people who were actually there that survived. And basically, this was like they had a little commune. They were living off the grid. They were doing their own thing. And he was kind of talking about a lot of the stuff, we talk about, where it's like, you have to protect yourself. We have to protect our freedoms. They're going to come knocking at our door, trying to take everything. And he tied religion into it. So it like legit was a cult. But anyways, they started like stockpiling weapons for fear of like an event like this, right? And the FBI got word that like this cult, this commune is stocking up on weapons. So they get a warrant and they just pull up there and like surround the place with guns. And so everyone on the inside hearing their perspective, they were like, this was his prophecy coming true. Everything he said would happen would happen. We got a knock on the door. There were guns everywhere. And we thought like they are going to kill us all. And so they fought and they lost, obviously. But like, it just makes me think about this. It's like, you're going to have people like that legit like will try to fight, but it's a losing battle. Like, you're not going to win. You're going to be outnumbered.
And that's the thing that it's like, so what the fuck are we supposed to do? And
Right.
like, I totally went down the rabbit hole of DOD directives after listening to this. And I looked into these laws and it just made me even more upset because one of the laws that DJ mentioned was the Posse Comitatus Act. And like he said, it's a 143-year-old law and it prohibits the military from interfering in civilian affairs. The law is literally one sentence and it says, quote, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress, willfully uses any part of the Army or Air Force as a posse comitatus or otherwise to execute the laws shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both, end quote. So I wanted to understand more about how this works. Like, what is this? So I looked it up, I read it, and then I found an analysis and explanation of the law on the Brennan Center for Justice website. It's brennancenter.org, so you guys can go look this up yourself. But basically, this means that members of the U.S. military can't participate in civilian law enforcement without the approval of Congress or an actual act written into the Constitution. And it applies specifically to federal military personnel in the Army and the Air Force. But there's another statute that says the same thing that applies to the Navy and the Marine Corps. And the only military entity that's not subject to this rule is the Coast Guard, because apparently they already have express statutory authority to perform law enforcement duties. And the National Guard isn't covered by this act either, because they report to their state's governor. So they can only participate in law enforcement activities that are approved by state law. The exception, as DJ mentioned when he was talking, is the National Guard in DC, because they're under presidential control instead of Washington. But when the National Guard in other states become federalized, which the president can do, then they're no longer subject to state law and they become part of the federal armed forces, which means that they're then bound or should be bound by the Posse Comitatus Act until they're returned to state control. So it sounds to me like they can either be law enforcement or not law enforcement, depending on who's in control of them. And if it's the federal government, then they're not supposed to be. Now, there's exceptions to the Posse Comitatus Act, and one of those is the Insurrection Act. And that's when a state government requests the president to deploy military assets to suppress an insurrection in their state. And this act also allows the president to use the military to enforce federal law. And this is only in cases of suppressing a rebellion against federal authority in a state, protecting a group of people's civil rights when the state government is unwilling or unable to do so. And under any of these circumstances, the president can do this with or without consent of the state government. So this is at the president's discretion. And this law is very broad in scope, and it's open to the interpretation of the president, because the law states that the military can be deployed if the president considers something to be an unlawful obstruction, combination, or assemblages or rebellion against the authority of the United States in any state by the ordinary course of justice proceedings.
Well, there we go. There we go.
Exactly.
All the dots are connecting. Insurrection. That their January 6th was like them priming the public. Like, if you even question or publicly talk about the election, you're an insurrectionist. And now that means that we can send the military in and take care of you, basically, right?
Yeah. And there are no, this Posse Comitatus Act, there are no exceptions in the Constitution for this. No part of the US Constitution expressly empowers the president to use the military for law enforcement. But we have the DOD making up their own rules, and they're claiming that there's all these exceptions like the Insurrection Act, and there's DOD Directive 3026.18 that gives this is where it like really freaked me out. It gives military commanders emergency authority to unilaterally use federal troops to quell large-scale, unexpected civil disturbances when doing so is necessary and prior authorization by the president is impossible. So, Stephanie, tell me if I'm interpreting this incorrectly, because to me, this says, let's say, for example, Biden's declared not competent to make decisions. Now we have military commanders that can just go ahead and deploy the military against American citizens to quell civil unrest. And then with this new DOD directive, now they can actually use lethal force. And remember, guys, keep in mind, this new directive was put in place less than 3 weeks ago. So it's clearly put there for the fucking election.
Well, you gave the example, Biden's declared not competent. What if there is no declared winner? What if it's like last time where weeks and weeks and weeks are going by and they don't have an answer? Then, oh, the military can just take over, who's really been in control this whole time anyways. I mean, that's what it sounds like. And what the hell? So the DOD has been writing in these laws that go against our Constitution and have supreme authority of the land, and like nobody knows about it.
Exactly.
I mean, that's really concerning, because my whole thing is, I'm like, we're not going to have an answer. You know, like, we know we're not going to have an answer on election day or election night or the day after. It's going to be like last time. They're going to drag it out. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be states disagreeing, probably more so than last time. And so here you go. There's no one, you know, declared in charge. And so the military just takes over. And now we have like a military state.
Yeah, either that or something does happen to Biden and they just throw Kamala in there because, you know, she's still vice president until
the
end of the year, right? So then they can just throw her in there. And it's like, this is some scary shit. Other than hearing it on Andy's podcast, I looked it up. I could not find a single article in the MSM covering any of this from the left or the right. Like, absolutely nothing. How does this kind of directive get put in place 3 weeks ago and nobody fucking says a word about it? Like, that's what blows my mind.
Before the biggest election of our lifetime, and it explicitly talks about insurrection.
Yes.
Which they've primed us all with, like, January 6th.
Yes, and using lethal force against insurrectionists. And their insurrectionists are defined however they choose to define it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's what they're planning for. They know that Trump is in the lead and people aren't going to roll over as easy this time. And so this is their plan of how they're going to deal with it. Yeah. Unbelievable. I mean, we knew, like, that's the thing. It's like, you know, if he is going to go after these treasonous people criminally, which he's pretty much like said, and then wipe out a lot of these government agencies, they're not going to let that happen. They're not going to just lay down and let that happen.
No, but even though we knew it, now it's in fucking black and white in government documentation that's available for the masses to look at, and nobody's fucking talking about it.
We need Elon Musk to send this document out so everyone can look at
Seriously.
it.
Yeah,
Because
I
that's the only
know.
way to get people to talk about it is have, someone at that level, because none of the news, not even Fox News, like none of them are going to touch this,
Right.
because then they'll be labeled, conspiracy theorists or insurrection, even though it's in black and white, like it's a government document.
Yeah. It's just crazy to me. This whole thing is like, if it wasn't real before, it's like really real now, you know?
Yeah, I know. I know. It's just like I have this like pit in my stomach. It's like you want all of this to just be over and like, can we just fast forward through the election? But I just keep getting the feeling like, okay, we can fast forward, but we're not going to know anything. Like it's going to be a clusterfuck. Like it's going to be so much worse than last time because there's so many more people that are awake now and not afraid to speak up. Last time people
And
were afraid to speak up.
yeah, and there's so much more at stake for the left this time. Like this is, like we've been saying all along, this is the most important election of our lifetime. This is what turns the tides.
Right. Yeah. And, and I'm thinking too, it's like, if this goes against the Constitution, can't the Supreme Court get involved? Well, all that shit takes time, a
Right.
long time. And this is 3 weeks before, not even before the election. Like, there's no way. And that could drag things out too. If there's, all these questions on the election and then it has to go to the Supreme Court, I mean, that could drag on for months and months and months. And then here
Yeah.
you go. Here's your answer, the military.
Yeah, that was quietly put in place with nobody mentioning except for Andy Frisella.
Unfreaking believable. Unbelievable. Where did they even, how did they even know about this? Did they say?
I don't know because DJ, like I've noticed in the last, they have this whole segment where they do the news a couple times a week. And I've noticed in the last like 6 to 8 months, like DJ's been more on a conspiracy theory kind of trend and kind of like we do, So I'm like, hey, maybe they're listening. But he went down this rabbit hole. And like normally he'll do the research and then like present it to Andy and they talk about it. But like he's really been on a conspiracy rabbit hole stretch lately. And I don't know what prompted him to even find this in the first place. I don't know if it was just listening to those comments from Mark Esper, but he didn't explain how he found it, but it's literally fucking right there. Like, and they linked all of this stuff in their episode, but it is honestly all there on government websites. And you can look up the Insurrection Act too, the Posse Comitatus Act. Like, again, it's all there in black and white. And nobody's fucking paying attention to it.
Wow. We should link this in the show notes for ours as
Yeah.
well. Okay.
Yep.
Well, man, that's some crazy shit. And I feel like it just connected like everything we've talked about for the past 2 years. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Here is what they put in place. Wow.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's crazy. So what a way to start the weekend. Now everyone can go and like spend their weekend freaking out and researching all this stuff. We'll have to come back with like a good fun episode on Monday. But man, I don't know how we're gonna ever top this. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you have a great weekend and we'll see you back here Monday.